Welcome back to Year 8 of the Regrettable Century. This is part 2 of a discussion that Ben and I had with Stephan Hammel of the Measures Taken podcast about his book, Toward a Materialist Conception of Music History, published by Brill and available from Haymarket Books. Like I said before, Ben and I are friends with Stephan, and so this discussion became a little bit broader than just a straightforward interview with an author might otherwise have been. So while part 1 was more introductory and the discussion more general, part 2 is more detailed, more specific, more theoretical when it comes to both musicology and Marxism. So yeah, if you haven't listened to part 1, go listen to that first and then come back here. Lastly, please like and subscribe and leave a review on whatever podcatching app you're listening on. It turns out that it actually does help. We also have a Patreon from which we sometimes post preview clips. We have a Discord where you can share articles, stories, suggestions for the reading groups, which you can also join. And if you're interested, we have a merch store with t-shirts and stickers and so on. Anyhow, that's enough of that. Enjoy part 2 of Toward a Materialist Conception of Music History.
That's right. Yeah.
No, go ahead.
No, I was going to say if Hegel, if I'm desacralizing Hegel, then I'm taking that desacralized Hegel and I'm making it profane.
That's right. On a different, well, not a different, it's somewhat different note. You had mentioned what you call the missed encounter between the Second International and musicology, and I think like that's something worth really dwelling on for a little bit. I would just want you to explain that. And
this obsessed me. I know this obsessed me because, and in fact, it led to me writing the New Grove article for the Oxford Music Online article for Guido Adler, because I became so invested in this originary moment in the discipline. Let me give you a summary of what I take musicology to have been at the moment of its birth, and its birth is the late 19th century. Obviously there's music literature before then for a very long time. In the ancient world, there's music literature. There are hominy texts from ancient Greece, from Rome, that transmitted to us through the Middle Ages and people like Boethius. But what I'm really talking about is a moment in the history of style where it's not enough to learn the rules, in which the rules that you're meant to follow when you're writing music have become so self-consciously decided upon by the individual artist. So much of it has become up for grabs. Think of the way in which style shatters in the 20th century, if you want to get a taste for what I'm talking about. Well, they become so much the property of the artist that you have to have some new rules for deciding which artistic rules in the construction of art, in this case music, you're meant to follow. And those meta rules are best derived from a historical analysis of where we came from and where we're likely to go. So in a moment where it's not clear how to proceed musically, musicology arrived in order to give us a story about where we came from and where we're going in order to understand how we might decide how to go about being musical. Now, we've gone far off track from that role that musicology might have played for itself. But the reason why it's important for me is because the primary, I'll call the central category of musicological inquiry, in my view, is the concept of style. It's a special kind of concept. It's this property of musical grammar that a historicist can analyze for its, let's say, evolutionary, its evolutionary story. And with that concept of style, which is this, I argue, is this materialist element in that science, in the science of musicology, is really well suited to harmonize with Marxism. And in fact, one of the ways that might be intuitive off the bat is to remember that Adler and Marx aren't that far apart in history, in fact, the concept of style that Guido Adler, the historical founder of musicology, his concept of style is borrowed from a guy named a guy named Zemper, and Zemper is writing his art historical theory of style in the same in the British Museum, maybe at the exact same time as Marx is researching and writing Capital. And so the Marxist political economy and the origin of the art historical category of style are birthed maybe in the same room. So not so strange, maybe, that they have something to do with one another. So I was really interested in this idea that like Kautsky and Adler are sort of, they're at the same time. And of course, Adler is the name of the Austro-Marxist.
Yeah.
They share this last name. I don't think there's any relation, but there's this missed encounter between the university musicology and this emerging science of Marxism. And if they just met one another, then we could have avoided this Hegelian detour.
No, we couldn't have. This is the one thing about Foucault that I think I would agree with, just outright.
Ooh. Oh, I'm so ready. I'm tingling.
Foucault says that to truly escape Hegel involves an exact appreciation of the price we have to pay to detach ourselves from him. It assumes that we are aware of the extent to which Hegel, insidiously perhaps, is close to us. It implies a knowledge, in that which permits us to think against Hegel, of that which remains Hegelian. We have to determine the extent to which our anti-Hegelianism is possibly one of the tricks directed against us, at the end of which he stands, motionless, waiting for us.
What is that, a Zen koan?
They've got...
Does the dog have Marxist nature? So it's well written. Foucault's a great prose stylist, and this is totally Foucauldian. That is, if Foucault's another historicist post-Kantian.
Yeah.
So no question, he feels an affinity with Hegel. He doesn't have Hegel's dialectical historical process at hand. This is why one episteme breaks into the next.
Right.
You know, the epistemes shattering on epistemes. And so he doesn't really have a story about how you get from point A to point B. But he definitely has transcendental conditions for the possibility of objective experience.
Mm-hmm.
And he definitely thinks that those are historical and change over time. So, unlike Kant, but like Hegel.
Right.
There's a lot of, Foucault. There's a great book on this by a woman whose first name is escaping me, but last name is Han, H-A-N, published by, I think, Fordham. I should have this in front of me. But about Foucault's Kantianism. That's really shaped my own reading of Foucault.
So he's a Hegelian neo-Kantian.
Yeah, he's a neo-Kantian. And in fact, he's got a lot in common with the other academic neo-Kantians. There's a lot of Foucault in the Marburg school, is kind of what I'm saying. No,
well, this just to contextualize this missed step, you open the introduction with the short history about Adler and his student Orell, who was a fascist, and basically that's a big part of this missed step is understanding that fascism is this, it originates in the reaction to revolutionary socialism and is unintelligible without it. And you have this whole discipline that's arrested in place.
So many important, I'm reminded of the fact that, there are figures from exactly this moment, the late 19th century, early 20th century, who we associate with the birth of a historicist conception in music, which gives rise to a science of history in music, right? As I say, right at the turn of the 20th century. One of those figures is Gustav Mahler, maybe the most popular classical music composer there is. Tickets to Mahler 2 in LA a few weeks ago were $350 to sit in the back. He's still very popular. He's a social democrat.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So the forward-looking musicians were, it's not just Eisler, it's also Webern, Schoenberg's pupil Webern, who in Austria in exactly this period, the early 20th century, found his home in workers' orchestras. And so it's all by way of saying that this misencounter didn't need to be so missed.
Right.
But fascism plays a huge role. So Adler has both social democratic followers and National Socialist followers.
That's, yes, the big, well, not the big, one of the big tragedies about fascism is, like what you say early on, is that it is born of the same moment, of the same anxieties about the world, and even in some cases from the same ranks as the socialist movement. And but it's what some people would call an antithesis to what we're trying to accomplish with the socialist movement. Anyways, the thing I actually wanted to talk about a little bit, to have you talk about rather, because we've talked about the first chapter, which is all about socialist realism. We spent a lot of time talking about the style criticism, forces and relations and musical production, a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
The thing which I think is missing, and I think anybody who wants to know why they should read your book, and I think that they should, if they are at all compelled by anything any of us have said.
Yeah.
One thing that will definitely be on their minds is this boogeyman of the culture industry. And you take this concept to task, and I think pretty effectively. But also, I think that it leaves open some questions. So maybe it's going to be good to talk about that a little bit.
Well, yeah. So the culture industry, I think, is a Marxified, political economy sounding or politically economic branding for what I take to be an idealist conception. But so the critique that I launch isn't entirely unique to me. I point out that those most interested in critiquing the culture industry, Horkheimer and Adorno, adopt their political economy not directly from Marx, but through an intermediary. And that intermediary is Friedrich Pollock, who's well known from the late stage of the Frankfurt School, that is the post-Horkheimer rather than pre-Horkheimer stage. Pre-Horkheimer stage, of course, is far more Marxist, includes Heinrich Grossman, who's an unapologetic Stalinist until his dying day, etc., and whose books have become revived. But the post-Horkheimer moment is this, critique of the culture industry. This goes back to these inherences. What Pollock says is, look, capitalism is going to eventually give way to a fully monopolized economy. That fully monopolized economy will be successful, non-crisis ridden, and its cultural expression will become industrial, totalizing. One can think of the novel We, for those of you who like your Russian science fiction. Yes, precisely. The nightmare is this monopolist state capitalism will successfully take over, do away with capitalist crises, and replace culture with the culture industry, which will make us all mindless lemmings. And I think that's, first of all, that's not Marxism. Marxism, I'm a big crisis theory guy, so I think Pollock's wrong. Pollock is also an anti-communist in the anti-Soviet sense, and that's worth remembering. And I'd rather think of it at this phase that we're talking about as rather than the industrial phase of culture, as the cultural phase of industry, where we're in this industrial society and it's developed such that we can be self-conscious about cultural policy.
Yeah, I would think that it makes a lot more sense when you say that merely abandoning the theory is dissatisfying. I would agree.
Right. That's right.
And I think that you just gave a very quick synopsis of an alternative to merely abandoning the theory.
Yeah, we shouldn't abandon the theory. That is, we should more rigorously historicize it. I think that's true. And I think we should link it up to political economy. But when we link it up to political economy, we should do it to Marxist political economy, which we know a lot more about by virtue of this revival. I mean, one of the legacies of 2008 has been that we read a lot more value theory than we used to be. Than we used to, I should say. So I'm thinking of everyone from Anwar Shaikh to Fred Mosley, and they don't agree with one another about a lot of things. But one of the things they have in common is that we're talking about classical political economic categories rather than this idea that actually we're in some kind of post-capitalism, whatever we're calling it, state capitalism. Maybe we're going to call it imperialism. Maybe we're going to call it, I don't know, something else. These days, it's techno-feudalism or everyone wants all the Marxists. There's a book to be written about all of the Marxist theories about how we're no longer in capitalism anymore and the laws of motion that are described in Capitals Volume 1 through 3 are no longer operative. This is one of my pet peeves.
I like how you just softly mentioned that.
one of my pet peeves.
I
would say that
Ben has questions.
I have a bundled question.
I just wanted to. I'm sorry. I'm just going to say this, and I'll shut up for a long time.
I
Actually,
don't believe you.
Jason has a notebook of questions.
This is one of those moments in which a little bit of an understanding of what Hegel means by the owl of Minerva is really useful here.
Yeah.
What do you mean we're already not in capitalism anymore? We won't know until well after the people who experienced that transition are dead.
Oh, okay. So I hear you when you say that, and that's I. I wonder though if we'll know we're not in capitalism anymore when the capitalists are behind bars.
Okay, sure. I mean, barring a revolutionary rupture, the one that we all desire. Anyways,
Yeah, I know.
Ben,
I know.
you said you had a. I love this book, and I love everything you get. The point of it. I have a different take on Hegel, but I don't think it actually matters when it comes to the substance of the book. I also slightly disagree. Yeah, I just disagree with the.
Yeah.
This is incidental, but your characterization of Bonaparte. But again, it's not important to the. Yeah, I think it's wrong.
I have no. I honestly. Please remind me. I can't. I'm struggling to remember my characterization of Bonaparte.
On page 134.
Okay.
No, sorry. Yeah, page 134. You refer to Napoleon's reinstitution of the trappings of feudalist absolutism. I think that's not true. I would not agree that that's what happened.
Oh, that's really a terrible paraphrase of one of the most beautiful lines ever written in Marxism.
Oh yeah.
Yes. Oh goodness. I don't have it in front of me, and so maybe you ought to cut it from the episode. But
I mean, I didn't figure any of this we were going to keep in there.
There is a line
Keeping everything.
from Ilyenkov about Napoleon being this, the negation that turns into the instantiation of exactly what he's meant to oppose. So look, if you disagree, it's
that's a philosophical / political disagreement that
we can argue about Bonaparte.
I very much take a Georges Lefebvre's position on Bonaparte. I have a different Marxist take on Bonaparte.
I quote you, by the way, sometimes saying that the thing about had Bonaparte liberated the serfs from Eastern Europe. The historical trajectory, history would have been very different and far more progressive if he had accomplished that. I've always liked that observation of yours.
I think I agree. I still agree with that. I think that's true. I also think it matters that Bonaparte also thought so in hindsight.
It is interesting that your two objections are so far, other than the Hegelian stuff, are to something having to do with the Czechs and Bonaparte.
Yeah,
it's very telling. Everyone reads. I mean, this is not a read, right? But like everyone reads with their own interests in mind. Me too. Me especially. We're all. I mean, I had a friend read the book and sort of just look for citations of her.
I feel like those are two constitutive elements of Jason's personality: the Czechs and Bonaparte.
Hey, but Ben, you had stuff you want to talk about?
Well, it's a running gag on our podcast, Stephan, that I bring us all the way back to the first page of everything, and then true Ben format. I want to return to.
But it's not in a linear way. It's not just going back. It's you're going like, in order for the discussion to progress upward, it has to go like this. So we get to this point, and then Ben says, "Well, what about this from the first chapter?" Well, and then we get to this point, and then Ben's like, "Well, what about this?" It's good. It's funny. We pick on him all the time, but I am never actually unhappy that this happens. So go ahead.
Jason mentioned that chapter 1's all about socialist realism, but actually it is chock. It's such a loaded introductory. You're basically stowing everything that has come to the say inciting incident of musicology, right? Going all the way back to
Right.
Kant and Hegel. And there's these tensions I notice between Kant and Hegel, and later between Lenin and Bogdanov, which are like really illustrative of how we can actually, for one thing, define what realism is. Like it is, you say it is as a conception, it is both descriptive and normative at once. And we have with Kant, you mentioned earlier, we have like the presumption of a subject, you know, and Hegel is like, no, subjectivity comes through the other. And then with Bogdanov, there's a sort of a presumption of what reality is through perception, which is a Kantian. Neo-Kantianism was a big deal in the early Bolshevik Party, right?
Yes, in fact.
And a point of tension. And Lenin is, with regard to art, looking at the received reality, which he's a polemicist. He's focused on seizing power. Everything is towards the end of that political concern, but it's like realism can't even be presumed. So I guess my question is, what would it even mean for historical materialism to serve as a methodological foundation for music history? You have to wrestle with what, in fact, historical materialism is.
Right.
Which is,
that's exactly
in the same
correct.
way, realism, you have to wrestle with what that is.
So there are two ways so there are two traditions here. On the one hand, and just to take the historical materialism part first, I'm a determinist. I'm an economic determinist. I think that, well, let's put it this way. Engels once called historical materialism, more than once, the economic interpretation of history. I think that's not so bad. So when I think about, historical materialism as a methodological foundation for music history, I think we should be attentive to the topic of the end of the book, right? Which is really just this long sketch of what it's like to track forces and relations of production as your explanatory framework for understanding why music making ought to be thus and so and not some other way. And to guess about what it might be like after a socialist transformation. It's very different from realism. Now, realism interests Marxists, socialists in general, but Marx and Engels in particular, because they thought of it as on a trajectory toward their own materialist conception of history. That is, realist literature, the granular way we're able to come to know the various layers within the social classes in French society in the 19th century through the novels of Balzac.
Yep. He was obsessed
precisely. That's part of our journey toward this materialist history. And so are the bourgeois materialist historians, the kind that Plekhanov talks about in the monist conception of history. I really break with that idea. And what's hard is that I'm also breaking with Marx and Engels when I break with that idea. So I don't prize realism for being a special privileged step on the road to the science of history. I think of it as one of many style periods in the history of the arts. I don't see a reason to extend those soi-disant realists in literature or in painting or in opera, by the way. I don't need to make that an expansive descriptive category, like analytic category for things that don't call themselves realism, in order to group them together and perhaps promote them as a properly socialist artistic style. Lukács is interested in realism because he's interested in exactly the process that I just described. He thinks the historical novel, for example, is on its way to teaching us about objective social conditions and to training the mind. It's society on its journey to understand itself expresses itself in the form of the historical novel as part and parcel of that, coming to self-consciousness, right, and therefore freedom, which is a super Kantian notion of freedom, right? Yeah. Freedom as self-consciousness. It's a big German idealist notion. So, yeah, I have this big fight with German idealism in this book. Right. And it goes like that.
Yeah, but it's almost like this realism. It's like it's like a spear that you could be standing on either end of, as far as consciousness goes. Which is why I find myself in this sort of split between Bogdanov and Lenin, kind of falling to each side in various moments. I think Bogdanov is absolutely correct to diagnose that. He fixates on the creative end of artistic production. Lenin is almost exclusively concerned with the received, right? With how that can be operated with or against. And Bogdanov actually, I think, has Adorno in some ways takes up his position in a reclaimed sense, and I find myself agreeing with it. You know, maybe for the first time, and yeah, I think that the formal freedom is a major part. This whole your story of the efficiency of artistic production leading to the professionalization of various kinds of artists, musicians.
Yep.
It almost seems like you're arguing for, maybe I'm wrong here, but like the next efficiency mile marker is deprofessionalization in some respects.
It's deprofessionalization. You put your finger right on it, Ben. It's deprofessionalization. And that follows from what I said before, which is that society has produced too many and too few musicians. Too many out of work musicians, who are constantly trying to make a living gigging. I mean, I've got friends who came out of music school and have ears of steel and are incredible, and find it hard to put together a full career as a classical musician. So there, on the one hand, we've got too many, and on the other hand, we've just got too few, and that has to do with a division of labor that we never decided on, that we decided should just be left to chance because, I don't know, the market would take care of it, or who cared anyway.
Right. And now, like the sort of avant-garde representatives of deprofessionalization, say Fluxus in the visual and performance art realm, like that, the only way we know about them is because they've been made relics of by the glam institutions where we go to study them. There's no like living reverberation of it, or maybe there is, but yeah.
Well, it's restricted to universities.
Yeah, exactly.
The people I know who take Fluxus seriously as a direct progenitor to their own work are university-trained composers.
Yeah,
and that's partly because I work in a university where we train composers. But I don't think that it's not a model for democratizing the means of production in the arts. Being able to sight sing a melody or to come up with a melody. This is a possible thing that every child can learn how to do. You can teach a child to invent a melody in such a way that if another person were to begin singing that or playing that same melody, let's say 3 notes in, it would make nice harmony with itself. We call that a canon. And you can improvise these sorts of things. And you can improvise them in real time, and you have someone listening to the melody and singing it back, say a fifth above, and imitating every move that the first melody does in the second singer or player. And then you can find a signal in this game to close this little game of improvisation and create a cadence at the end. The rules for that are really, really simple, and they help you listen. They help your ears develop in the exact same way as learning how to draw. And I don't mean be a great artist, but I mean be able to draw a cube and a conical form, to be able to design a bottle. That every single anyone who can learn how to read can learn how to draw like that. And that's going to make you better at seeing. It develops the human capacity. It makes you, and here's where I think the concept becomes most relevant, it makes you wealthier, instantly wealthier. Just like
this is what I mean by spiritually wealthy, by the way.
Yeah, they're right. No, we don't really disagree. I mean, I'm trying to draw out the disagreements between Jason because it's the fun thing to do, because we agree on 98.999% of everything.
But I also think
we used to just stay up late and drink a lot, and that would settle all of these things. So when we had a proper discussion, we would have already dealt with all the.
I miss that so much I could cry. But yeah.
you've already desacralized the spirit, so you don't have to be nervous about Jason using spiritually wealthy.
That's right. Yeah, because exactly. Actually, that's a good point. I should be less allergic. Part of me just really wants to have it out about, about efficiency and about this desacralizing move that I'm making. I'm not sure that's happened quite in my intellectual world yet. Like, I haven't found an opponent who's just really genuinely offended by this move and wants to correct it.
You know what we should talk with you about?
Learned a lot.
We should have a round table, whatever, dialogue debate about the Luddites and efficiency.
Oh yeah. Actually, yeah, Stefan. If you ever want to, react to our "The Luddites Were Right" episode, that would be a really interesting.
That'd be really
discussion.
fun, actually. That's that. Yeah. You're right. That's a perfect discussion because of how married I am to this idea of that. The problem with capitalism isn't that it promotes efficiency; it's that it promotes only some kinds of efficiency and suppresses all kinds of other forms of efficiency.
But I think maybe
for that reason.
I think a better word, because I immediately sense that you're using it in a there's almost a misdirect in using the word efficiency for what you're advocating for. You're advocating for something approaching harmony. There's a utopian meaning to the way you're utilizing it, which flies in the face of how we are accustomed to thinking about it.
I actually think that's a really important point. It's worth dwelling on a little bit. The precise meaning of the words being used, not just in this one case, but generally speaking, really matters when we say spiritual, or we say efficiency, or we say any number of things. I might disagree with you. I might not. I don't actually know. And throughout the course of the discussion, I often find we don't really disagree. We just disagree with the ways in which we might disagree with one interpretation of a word, which incidentally is it's not ongoing anymore. It was probably going to be an on again, off again forever debate with another friend of ours, mutual friend of ours, about translation and how it's not the case. I would maintain it's not the case that any translation of anything will do because the basic point gets across. Actually, the opposite point can be made depending on the translation of a given text.
Take Marx's Capital, for instance.
Yeah. Marx's Capital is a good example. Another really good example is anything by Lenin.
Yeah, exactly.
And another good example would be any other thing.
Well, you know that Lars Lee has made a whole career out of correcting slight or what look like minor translation errors, but which actually lead to gigantic theoretical confusions.
I'm a big proponent of Lars Lee's school of thought, is what I would say.
Lars is a rock star.
So, Stefan,
Ben,
wait,
you had some of the stuff you wanted to talk about, right?
Well, I do, but it's kind of related to, I actually went and found maybe the only YouTube recording of the Alexander Davydenko's About Lenin.
Hell yes.
It was great. What I really like about it is it kind of formally represents the, as you put it, quoting Hegel, the authentic subjectivity is an I that is a we and the we that is an I. So it is a solo performance, but it is disrupting the thing you're talking about when you get into, I keep forgetting the Hungarian's name,
Marotti.
Yeah, when his criticism of the song form,
right,
which I think can be misunderstood. When I first was reading that, I was like, "What the hell is he talking about? Songs predate proprietary. What about all these ancient folk songs I love that are culturally produced by generations? Those are still songs." But I think that example maybe is illustrative of his critique, right?
Yeah, okay. So this is worth taking apart only because I've been working on Marotti for the last 2 weeks. A song form doesn't refer to all those things that we would call songs.
Yeah.
but I should parenthetically mention that lots of the folk music that we think of as folk music, Marotti will, as the work of generations that has never been old, has never been young, and doesn't have an author because it's a folk song, are the result of bourgeois influence upon the peasant world. So he will argue that. However, he thinks that there are these collective, figurative, variative elements that aren't song form, even though we might call them songs. So, for example, think of the way in which a game song among children can work. The way they can infinitely repeat and be infinitely variable and are there to construct action. Those are elements that Marotti thinks comes from the pre-bourgeois world. He also thinks that the prevalence for improvisation, of iterative improvisation in jazz, is an expression of a collective variative form.
I love that.
But something that has a nice beginning that comes up to a climax and then closes nicely, those elements, he thinks of those as bourgeois. That is, songs that are soloistically designed, or designed such as to foreground a single melody, and that close decisively. Those he thinks of as bourgeois elements. Does that mean that there can't be any compound forms? No, of course not. So to take an obvious one, a hybrid form of the feudal heroic epic and the bourgeois song is the ballad form, the folk ballad. It's neither one nor the other. It's both. It's a folk music that has become songified in the context of rapidly expanding markets.
Or you mentioned jazz, free jazz composers are often quoting jazz standards within their explorations. So they're stowing away, their inheritance inside of something that's disrupting. It's sort of beginning, middle, end structure.
Yeah, exactly. There are lots of ways to get out of song form. Ornette Coleman's one of them. Although Marotti would think of someone like Coleman as as bourgeois experimentalism, I think.
Why?
He has nothing to say about free jazz. Oh, because he thinks that as song form stops becoming effective as an expressive tool for the bourgeoisie, as it increasingly comes into conflict rather than allyship with a rising proletariat. So to the extent that the bourgeoisie has an angry peasantry that with which it can ally in order to overthrow the aristocracy, there's a relationship between the music making of the towns and the music making of the countryside. They come to influence one another. And you can have the bourgeois popular. However, as these two things come to a head, as industrial society matures and proletarian culture starts to become more mature, bourgeois culture becomes decadent. This is Marotti speaking. I'm ventriloquizing now.
So he's arguing the same thing opposite of Adorno.
Yeah, no, it's very Adorno. It's very Adornian. And actually, Adorno, God, what Adorno means by jazz has filled too many books. But all by way of saying that he would have thought of these experimentalisms as expressions of bourgeois decadence, a kind of post-song form crumbling. Here's to put it this way. There's a great art historian out of the Soviet period named Mikhail Lifshitz, who writes a great book on Marx and Engels' philosophy of art in the 1930s, but later in life, in the 1960s, writes a reaction to pop art and lots of experimentalisms in the visual art field. And the title of his book is The Crisis of Ugliness.
I think you referenced that, don't you?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I do. And if you've ever been looking at let's be really polemical now. Like if you look at Guernica, and then part of you is like, the problem with this is that it's so ugly. then maybe you've really become the properly Marottian critic.
But then you can also become the art for art's sake, or something.
Yeah. Hey, I'm art for art's sake in this way. I'm art for art's sake in the same way that I'm for coffee's sake. That I'm for public transportation's sake, education for education's sake, long life for long life's sake. The use values are self-recommending in most cases.
Right, that's fair.
See, that would be I would share that opinion if I did not uh, if it did not leave open an appreciation for what you might call the metaphysical. But I think that's well beyond the confines of this discussion. I mean, we're coming up on like 2 hours, Ben.
Yeah, we should wrap.
What are the other things that you want to make sure you talk about?
Well,
I'm not sure that there's much left to cover. There's very little undiscovered country. We haven't talked much about some of the details of Chapter 6, which people either ignore Chapter 6 or only talk about Chapter 6 in this book.
I can see why. I mean, because it seems first of all, because it's a little bit outside the realm of most people's. If you're like a music history person,
right?
Chapter 6 is like forces and relations in musical production. It's like gibberish,
right?
Or the rest of the book is gibberish, and this is the one that makes sense to you because it's technical and it's it's about production and so on.
Right, exactly. But I just want to mention that Chapter 6 is this moment in the book where I have to tell you, I have to give you a positive case that this is all going to pan out. I think that the book is strongest in its criticism, and it needs to be, I needed it to be, because of how seriously I took the tradition I'm responding to and that I'm trying to break with. So if the book reads as a lot of protest from a recent apostate, that's because that's exactly what it is. I'm wrestling with my forefathers.
Well, so like when you say that bringing Marxism and musicology into discursive synthesis consists in wagering that musical rightness flows from the labor process. If you could interpret that one way, but I know you well enough to know that is a very hopeful proposition that you make.
Yeah. So
I was wondering if you just expound on that a little bit.
Yeah, let's talk about musical rightness for just a hot second before we end. I think it's an important concept. This is my successor concept to the concept of the beautiful. That is, I take it that
which you mean
the beauty ugliness.
The beautiful is the efficient for you.
Yeah, that's right. In a way, yes, because what we're doing when we listen to music and we like it is that we are implicitly endorsing its moves. That we are saying that there is a quality of rightness to the way in which this music proceeds. And that quality of rightness has certain criteria that it checks off. So not every one of those criteria are going to be easily made fully explicit, by the way. I think that's a complicated process. But whatever they are, however musical rightness comes to be, it must be because it conforms to the best use of the available means. And that's, if there's a way to do the Coldstream thing and really cut out the metaphysical, that would be it.
And the best use would straddle the popular with the revolutionary, which is what the avant-garde does not do.
The avant-garde is, here's the mistake of the avant-garde. They get something right and they get something wrong. The avant-garde gets right that we should focus on means. It constantly wants to revolutionize grammar. There are as many musical grammars as there are experimental 20th century composers. Whether you want Schoenberg's dodecaphony, or you want Cage's experiments with silence, or you want Stravinsky's sort of neoclassicism, or you want, any of these other composers. These composers are associated with a style that isn't a style of an era; it's the style of a person. They have taken full conscious control over musical grammar. But what they haven't weighed that against is whether or not we can universally endorse that new musical grammar for some reason. And I think the only way you can universally endorse it is for the reason why we universally endorse chordal writing starting in the 1600, which is that it's the best use of the new efficient means. So it gets something right. We should think about grammar. We should think about the means of production. It gets something wrong, which is that any experiment is self-justifying.
I don't know, though. There are exceptions. I immediately think of Brecht. He's what he's creating has a dual nature. It is meant for a popular consumption, but it is in its original like blueprint extremely avant-garde always. I mean, maybe I would be hard pressed to find a bunch of examples like Brecht, but and that again is drama. It's not music.
I kind of think that you would be.
Although it involves music.
It involves music. It involves popular music. Music that is still covered to this day.
True.
People know Mac the Knife and are like the most bourgeois motherfuckers known to.
Not only do people know Mac the Knife, they don't even know the Bobby Darin cover of Mac the Knife. They don't, let alone the original, let alone that it is from the Three Penny Opera. They only know they know it as a tune thrice divorced from its purpose.
Just about a bad dude, cutting loose.
Yeah. Yeah,
you know that Ruben Blades has a version of Mac the Knife that's really popular on his album Siembra. So if you want the salsa version of Mac the Knife, you've got that too.
Nice.
Look, everybody wants the salsa version.
Yeah, it's called Pedro Navaja, by the way. If for those of you who are listening, go on.
Well, I guess I have like a wrap up comment, so I'm going to save it till the very end. So
why isn't that now, Jason? Why isn't that right now?
Because I'm going to assume that Ben has a thing he wants to say that's going to bring us to some point. So I have to make sure that we're at the end before I say it.
I don't know.
Okay.
I'm very suspicious of this binary between. I mean, decadence. It can't be defined by like something's distance to popular literacy. I think there's lots of popular decadence that is, they're just
increasingly.
Yeah,
so.
there's too many. It's too neat. One thing.
I mean, that's the consolation prize of the collapse and failure of the New Left is that there is popular decadence, at least.
And in a way, the New Left is kind of like jazz. Like, okay, jazz when it comes into being is a deeply popular art form. It is consumed by the masses. It is played in juke joints and in living rooms. And now, even the most stylish, melody-based variants of jazz are listened to by a very small portion of, you might call them an avant-garde market. The same people listening to swing are the ones buying free jazz often enough. Musicologists and people who like older, like music history,
and musicians themselves.
Yeah, and musicians themselves. So there's a natural, we might say, decadence effect of being in time, right, where the popular becomes the avant-garde, or the big becomes the small. I don't know. I don't think there's just not a way of talking about these categories as if they all mean the same thing.
I agree with that. We have to be careful with the concept of decadence. I think that what is genuinely decadent is that which has become anachronistic. Mm-hmm. And if there is a way so let's just take a non-musical example. The U.S. healthcare system is decadent.
Yes.
Because it is incredibly inefficient use of the available means.
Yes.
I was on the highway the other day, which I do a lot because I live in Southern California. So I was on the highway the other day and I was looking at the Tesla in front of me and looking at how many miles I'd driven in my car since I'd bought it. And I was thinking to myself that at some point my car was going to explode and I would have to replace it. And that I'd prefer to replace it with an affordable electric vehicle, of which the Tesla was not an example. And I thought to myself that what I really wanted was a BYD. And then I thought, well, if I want it, that means I will have it. The consumer will win here. And that's how I know that the American empire will fall. I'm on the freeway having the experience of the desire of a BYD. And in that experience, I'm experiencing the fall of the American empire. It's a beautiful thing.
That's good.
That's perfect. So there are a whole bunch of other things that we could talk about that I even kind of wanted to, but
we're gonna have to do part 2.
Like,
have Daniel on with you.
Or just or just do Jesus. We got to do our Jesus episode, and we got to do our Luddite.
Yeah.
Part two.
Yeah, there are things like the emergence of the musical entrepreneur,
Yes.
association / organization of musicians into guilds or
Unions.
fraternal organizations and or unions.
Yeah, they do their best to try to avoid being labor unions, of course. And to this day, musicians' unions are very conservative.
Very much so, yeah. There's also like the canned music as a threat to organized musicians. Yes. And then there's like musical corporatism and musical socialism and musicology itself as a productive force.
Yep.
But I think that to talk about all those things would take much more time than we have here. So I think instead what I would do is tell the listener, just go buy the book and read it.
And yes, and email me. My email is hammels, HAMMELS @uci.edu. Please email me your questions, your argumentative, unfair reactions to my book.
Yeah, we will put your email and the link to to the Haymarket site to buy the book.
Well, before you hit the stop button, I have a gut punch question. You can answer it in as few as one word. But Stephan Hammel, could an aesthetic theory ever actually stand alongside the value theory of capital?
No.
Okay.
I think that reading my book makes you have to say no. That said, I am deeply devoted to not only supporting but to cultivating in my working life aesthetic responses. I teach people how to listen to music as part of my daily life, and I'm constantly getting better at having aesthetic experiences. But I don't describe them that way exactly. Another way to describe them is to say that I tutor consumption. And my own consumption is getting ever more efficient.
I'm very satisfied with that answer. I'm glad it was no. I'm really glad it was no. See, he's warm stream. You know, we can bring him over.
Much more so than I think that he knows, much more so than he wants to admit.
If he had said yes.
Right. But definitely that's the case. But also, you will think he's very warm stream. And then you spend enough time and you're like, oh no, this is like ice cold.
Yeah.
Because
Stephan,
he contains a multitude.
Well, our good friend Leo was talking about in Siberia, in the Dachau, they construct the bathhouse, and what they do is they sit in the heat of the bathhouse, and then they run out into the snow in the winter time.
Yeah,
and then they run back into the bathhouse. So that's the experience of reading this book.
I have, I'm sure more than one listener will guess that I'm a great friend of the bathhouse.
Okay, on that note, I'm going to hit stop.
Рабочие и крестьяне не смогут прожить без нас. Без нас некому будет установить порядок, определить работу, и труду. Без нас все развалится и государство распадется.